The histrionic man, who he is, how he differs, and what it means to love him. This one rarely gets discussed because clinical and popular psychology literature on histrionic personality disorder is mostly written about women. Well, partially because that disorder has historically been diagnosed in women in higher rates, and partly because the traits associated with it map onto cultural scripts about femininity. The histrionic man presentation is shaped by the same structure. There's this fear of not being seen, dependence on external attention and validation, and they need audience, but it gets filtered through a bit different ideas about male emotional expression. What histrionic personality disorder actually is in a man. Histrionic personality organization is built around one central fear of invisibility. The person with HPD, male or female, experiences something close to psychological non-existence when they're not receiving attention, admiration, or response from the people around them. And the attention does not have to be positive. It simply has to be there. They have to register. Underneath this is typically a deep deficit in what object relations theorists would call object constancy, the internalized sense that one is valuable and continuous even when no one is currently reflecting that back. So histrionic person never quite developed that internal anchor, and they spend their lives in a loop. They seek external confirmation of their existence all the time. In a man, this presents differently than in a woman, because men are not culturally permitted the same emotional expressiveness, the same theatrical, like that, displays. And so the histrionic man adapts. He finds channels for the same underlying need that fit within masculine cultural scripts. How he differs from the narcissistic male person. This is, I think, the most important distinction, and the one that is frequently not really discussed, because both the narcissistic man and the histrionic man want attention. Both can be very charming, captivating. You just can't take your eyes off them. And both create this relational intensity that feels at the beginning like extraordinary connection. But the narcissistic man always wants admiration. He wants to be seen as exceptional or superior, uniquely important. And his attention seeking is organized around a grandiose self-image, and that requires constant confirmation. He's not interested in emotional engagement for its own sake. He wants an audience that reflects back his specialness, uniqueness. So intimacy is something he finds threatening, because real intimacy requires mutual vulnerability, and grandiosity and vulnerability, they just don't come together. And the histrionic man wants response. He wants to move people, make them laugh, worry, make them feel something. He's less interested in being seen as superior than being seen as interesting, as someone whose emotional life warrants engagement. He's capable of genuine warmth, and his interest in other people is real. He wants emotional contact. He wants to matter to people, not just in an admiring way, but in a real way. And so this distinction has enormous practical implications for relationship experience. The partner of a narcissistic man often reports feeling invisible, like a mirror, as if their only function is to reflect him back. The partner of histrionic man often reports feeling very seen, felt like the relationship has more emotional color than anything she has known before. And the problem comes later, and it's a different problem. Also, we need to distinguish between histrionic and borderline. Both histrionic and borderline involve emotional intensity and relationship instability, and they have fragile sense of self, and they depend on relationship, and both involve difficulty being alone with oneself. But the fear is different. The borderline personality is organized primarily around abandonment. His emotional volatility, his idealization, devaluation cycles, reactivity, these are all responses to the perceived threat of being left, abandoned. He clings, pushes away at the same time. He can become rageful, destructive when he feels that relationship is slipping. So the emotional tone of the relationship is often periods of intense closeness interrupted by crisis that feel like ground shifting, like earthquake. The histrionic man is organized primarily around invisibility, around not being attended to. His reactivity is less about fear of abandonment and more about fear of being not interesting or forgettable. He does not typically rage when he feels that the relationship is slipping. He escalates and performs. And he becomes more dramatic, more emotionally intense, more demanding. He's not punishing, he just wants attention. The borderline relationship can feel sometimes generous in how volatile it is. And the histrionic relationship tends to feel more, I'd say, exhausting than threatening, more like being asked to watch a performance and respond to it with appreciation. That said, both involve a real and significant emotional toll on the partner. How you spot histrionic personality? He is like a magnet. He's so engaging in group settings. He knows it. Histrionic man has typically discovered, usually early in life when he was a child, that he has a particular capacity to command a room. He may be funny, with that instinct for what an audience needs. He may be a storyteller who makes ordinary events sound like epic. He may be physically expressive in ways that you read as charisma. What happens when the attention in the room shifts away from him? Because something changes. It's subtle recalibration, steering of the conversation back. Because his stories always position him at the emotional center. This is one of the more reliable markers. Regardless of the subject of the story, it can be work conflict, family drama, the emotional center of gravity returns to his experience, his response, his feelings about what happened. And other people in his narratives, they are two-dimensional. They present primarily to occasion his reactions. They're not fully realized characters. So his self is organized around him. And he can also be a crisis generator, but those crises are always emotionally compelling. Not all histrionic men make crisis consciously or obviously, but there is often a pattern which can be visible over time. The situations require urgent emotional engagement from people around him, maybe health concerns, or workplace dramas that require immediate processing, or relationship conflicts with friends or family members that need his partner's full attention and sympathy right now. And each individual incident can seem legitimate. The pattern over time has a quality of perpetual motion, as though you feel like stillness for him is unbearable. And his emotional expression is intense but non-specific. And this is the paradox. The histrionic person is highly emotionally expressive, but not emotionally deep in the reflective sense. He can cry easily, speak with passion, describe his inner life vividly, but when you listen carefully, the content is he's less able to tell you what exactly he feels, where it comes from, and what it connects to. The emotion is real, but it doesn't stay long enough. He doesn't process it. He is also physically expressive and attuned to physical impression, and this can take many forms in men. He may be unusually attentive to his appearance, very self-conscious about how he's being perceived. He may use touch naturally in ways that feel warm and genuine, but also serve to establish connection and create response. Or he may have a physicality, a way of moving through space, occupying a room that draws attention naturally. And he's extraordinary in the beginning, and specifically extraordinary at making you feel seen, because what he needs is response. He becomes very skilled at generating that response, and one of the most reliable ways to generate emotional response from another person is to make them feel profoundly understood. The histrionic man in early courtship often has an almost uncanny ability to reflect people back to themselves, notice things, say the right thing, respond with exactly the emotional tone that fits that specific moment. And you feel like, oh my God, he knows me. What distinguishes this from actual attunement is sustainability. Genuine attunement deepens over time. Histrionic man's attunement tends to plateau or diminish as relationship becomes more established. And the attention he sought is he got it. So he doesn't handle being outshone gracefully. This is perhaps one of the most telling signs, one of that often does not become visible until the relationship is somewhat established. When someone else in his orbit receives significant attention, admiration, emotional focus, maybe someone is successful, your partner's achievement, child's moment of being celebrated, there's often a subtle but detectable discomfort. Quiet pullback toward himself, a redirect. Sometimes a manufactured need that coincides with unfortunate timing. What it is like to love a man with histrionic features. If you have fallen in love with a histrionic man, and it is genuinely easy to do because the early experience of being with him can be among the most alive and vivid relational experiences available, then you likely already know some of this from the inside, because the beginning is intoxicating. He's present in a way that few people manage to be. He notices everything, responds to everything. He finds you interesting, and you sense it, and the relationship has texture and color and intensity that makes other relationships seem somehow gray by comparison. And then slowly or quickly, depending on the particular man, certain things begin to emerge. The emotional labor asymmetry becomes visible. You realize that the relationship has a direction. His emotions flow toward you, and your emotions are present primarily as they relate to him. Your difficult day matters when it gives him something to respond to. Your achievements register when they reflect well on him or occasion his pride. Your struggles are attended to in the moments when he has emotional bandwidth remaining after his own needs are met, which is not always. He's not withholding it deliberately. It is more that his attentional structure is organized around himself as the emotional center of gravity. He doesn't have enough self-awareness to de-center and attend to another person's emotions, feelings, thoughts. And so you notice that validation loop. You begin to notice that certain conversations have a shape, as if they move toward a particular destination, which is his reassurance that he is interesting, worthwhile, talented, loved. And at first, this feels like intimacy. Later, it can feel more like a function that you're being asked to perform. You're being an audience for him, and you start feeling it. And his distress is always more urgent than yours, always. Not because his distress is so total when it arrives that it reorganizes the emotional priorities of the household and your relationship. You notice that you have become skilled at timing your own needs, knowing when it is and is not possible to bring something about you, and you are calibrating your emotional expression. So that's that invisible emotional labor that accumulates over time, and you get tired of it eventually. What is possible if you love him? So, of course, it depends on the specific man and his degree of insight, willingness to change, and his own patterns and quality of support that he has access to. So what does not work is attempting to meet his need for attention comprehensively. It cannot be done. The need is not a reasonable need that will be satisfied by sufficient effort. It is a structural need organized around an internal deficit that external validation cannot fill ever. For someone who, like him, is organized around that fear, terror of invisibility, withdrawal doesn't help to build resources, but they escalate. What has a chance? Honest, warm, non-shaming naming of that pattern. Not in, of course, when everyone is in the heat of the moment, but something like when you're quiet. I notice when situation is okay and quiet, you can say that I feel like our conversations always naming what is going on with care and not accusation, telling him that sometimes you notice conversations go back to him. Don't say always, because that makes people frustrated. So you can say that you matter to me, and what I need is our relationship to be more mutual in tending to each other's needs and problems. The patterns that organize histrionic personality structure are not amenable to goodwill alone. They require sustained, boundaried relational experience that good therapy provides also. A space where the performance becomes unnecessary because the therapist's consistent presence begins to build the object constancy that was never adequately developed. What you need to honestly assess is whether he's capable of curiosity about himself. Not whether he's willing to talk about himself, that's never the problem, but whether he can tolerate that specific discomfort of looking at his own patterns with openness rather than another performance of self-reflection, because he's good at performance. So can he stay with something that you name and that is difficult without taking the conversation back to him from you? The histrionic man is typically someone who learned very early that the only reliable way to feel real was to be witnessed. And he built his entire self around the project of making that happen. So the performance is genuine, the need is genuine. The warmth, when he has that warmth, is also real. What he has not yet learned, and what the relationship might slowly teach him, is that he is real even when no one is watching. That is the biggest thing. And it takes work and effort, but it begins, as most significant work does, with someone caring enough to tell him the truth about what they see and show them some of the blind spots. Let me know if you encountered histrionic men in your life, maybe in relationships or at work, and how you handled them. Take care.